Welcome, welcome. Is this, Richa, let me ask you, is this your first time around at FICCI Frames? Or you've been here before?
It's my second time.
It's your second time around.
Yeah.
Lovely. And lots has changed, clearly for the better.
It was a different hall, yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, she has a wicked sense of humor, we all know that. And also a wicked way of portraying her characters, and she's so fine in her performances. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Richa Chadha. One round of applause again, please. So the next person I would like to see that she's always delivered at the same time, you know, been part of each and every scrutiny or anything that can better the script or the whole product entirely. Ladies and gentlemen, she doesn't need any introduction, but please, a big round of applause for Miss Ekta Kapoor. Thank you everybody. And to moderate this, welcome Games 2024, and it's absolutely an honor. And we are celebrating you guys, and I must say, we need to celebrate you guys every single day. Without further delay, guys, the moderator for the evening is going to be Mr. Vikram Chandra, founder, editor, G Technologies. Can I have... So over to you, sir.
Mike, be sitting in the middle of this panel, so great to be here. And I'm going to just start by getting straight into it. I know this is one of the final sessions today, and a lot of people will be wanting to head off at some point. So I'm just going to start off by asking you people about the evolution of the industry. Is this echoing? Yes. Or is that my... Check 1, 2, 3, 4. Check. That's better. I'm just going to steal your mic, Richa, if you don't mind. And I'll pass it so much. The role of women has changed so much. The fact that they are leaders like you, obviously playing a major role in transforming everything is something that's clear. It's also be wrong to believe that because we have a few leaders, everything has changed for everyone and it's a dramatically different place for all women. So before we go any further, let me just try and get from you the state of the industry, how much has changed, how much still needs to change. Would you like to go first, Aparna, and then we'll go this way?
So it's definitely the whole industry has gone through a paradigm shift. I distinctly remember when I had started out about 22, 23 years ago, you know, I'd probably be the only woman on sets at that time. You know, often ignored, wouldn't be taken for outdoor skeds because, you know, I'd become a nuisance. I wouldn't be able to share a room with anyone. How would they organize a toilet? And therefore, I wouldn't get the credit on screen. It was, those were tough days. From then to now, there's been a paradigm shift. Just the number of women who are now in front of and behind the camera, it's incredible, and I also want to acknowledge the role of streaming in it. It's really democratized the industry, the kind of avenues, the opportunities that have opened up. It's just absolutely beautiful. However, I also wanted to point out that, you know, last year in 2023, the World Economic Forum had put out a global gender gap report. And as per that, if women were to achieve parity in this world, it would take at least 131 years. But I feel in India we've made some long strides, you know, whether it is getting 44%, whether it is women getting 44% medals in the Asian Games or 100 women behind the Chandrayaan-3. We've made some great strides, but a lot needs to be done. You know, at Prime Video, we partner on a report that Ormax Media and Film Companion put out on gender representation. And as per that, out of 131 CXO positions that exist in media and entertainment, only 13% are occupied by women. Out of the over 150 shows and films that they studied, and 750 HOD positions, only 12% occupied by women. So we still have a long, long way to go. And I just wanted to put out a small insight that when women are at the helm of affairs, when women are commissioning content, there are more women who find jobs both in front of and behind the camera. The gaze is different, the lens is different. So we still have a lot of work to do. We've made some great strides.
Great. Ekta, would you also feel that the changes are, of course, accelerating, and OTT may have a factor in it. But did the change start earlier? Did it start from film? Did it start from television? Did it start in other areas also? And if so, what to your mind was the inflection point where people said, you know, actually there's no difference, and nobody's going to be thinking twice about the fact that is it a female director or a male director? Because that's what actually you should aspire to, that it's not even a talking point, who's the director.
So before we get into being gender agnostic, what's really important is to know that the commerce of films or television starts from the basic genesis, whose story it is. So when you tell more stories about women, there are more writers and directors. While I'd love to be politically correct and say every story is gender agnostic, there you need sometimes a female lens to a story. And television, I thought, created that base for a lot of women to find a safe space to work, because a lot of their stories were told. And movies used to have the hero, the villain, and the heroine would mostly be there for songs. Television had the heroine and the vamp, and the heroes would be there for the sweet scenes in the middle, you know, sometimes even death scenes. So, so that really had, but you know, I'd like to point out something that I feel more and more is happening. While there are more women behind the scenes and all of us have taken stronger positions to see that there is lesser gender bias when it comes to having women getting equal opportunity, in movies, more and more, it's becoming difficult to make films about women. I'm just making a film called The Crew, and there was so much love for the promo. And I can't even tell you the amount of people who've told me that, who will watch a film about 3 women? Ab isme 3 hero hote to the story would be totally different. This mindset can only change by changing the commerce of it. And that me and Ria, as 2 female producers, are extremely dedicated to. Because when the commerce changes, the kind of films change, the lens changes, more women work. So I think it's give and take. And while I feel TV has changed and streaming, because of the likes of Aparna and Monica, has changed a lot, film still is a tough challenge.
I'm actually interested to hear what you just said, and somewhat alarmed, because there was a perception a few years ago that female-oriented movies and serials are actually becoming easier to produce, easier to market, easier to sell. You're saying that's not the case?
Yeah, not the case. It's changed again after COVID. It becomes far tougher because it's easier to make a slightly more misogynistic, if not at least a very full of machism kind of film, than making a film celebrating womanhood or feminism. I mean, the word feminism is almost a taboo now in movies, but it's so scary because we as women producers want to support even a storyline which gives you a certain amount of change. But then, like I said, we'll be at it and let's see what happens.
Richa, that from that view from behind the screen, what's it like in front of the screen? Because there was a perception that, you know, female actors are getting a chance to do a wide range of different sort of movies. Options were coming their way which would not happen earlier. How has it been for you?
I'm actually really lucky because I got to play very different parts in my life, and very sort of risky and controversial and sort of interesting parts, but none of them have been regular. So I can't really speak to that, but I think that yeah, things are changing, things are moving slowly. But I have to agree with Ekta here. Till there is a response from the audience, which is you guys, very little can change because everything becomes a show-based part, the business part of the filmmaking sort of overwhelms everything else eventually. You have to make things that are I'm not saying you have to necessarily compromise on quality, but you have to make things that are accessible, that people want to pay money to watch, and that will drive the change. The storytelling, yes, of course. The stories will, the people will only come if the stories are nice. I mean, in most cases. Kabhi-kabhi ulta bhi hota hai.
But I mean, we've seen movies and others made about machismo, about some of the other themes, and they've done really well. How far away are we from the position that women are going to be able to, obviously you'll be creating the movies, acting in them. What will it take to get more and more of those women-dominated themes to really become the norm? And you don't have to think twice about it, and it's not less marketable. How far are we from that?
Someone censoring me? No. I'm just saying, I think I forgot the question.
No, I'm saying that how long do you think it will be where the person making, is it the situation right now that if it's a female director, a female producer, females who are working behind the scene, or a female-oriented movie, does that still matter, or is that not a factor today?
I mean, it is a factor because when you try and go and sell this film, that suppose you've produced a film with a female director and a female producer, if you go and try and sell the film, they'll ask ki hero kaun hai. By and large, it's still a boys' club. Let's not pretend otherwise. But I think the change will come when the stories get better and more interesting, and when people are engaged with those stories, whether they're rip-tickling family comedies or something about empowerment. I mean, it's not, this is I think, I mean, basically I want to stop coming on these panels where we discuss female, feminist things, because there's no panel which is for men, right?
Yeah.
How can we improve the position of men in the industry? You know, abhi nahi ho raha hai, so I feel like I want to stop coming.
And you're right, that is when you know you're getting somewhere, when you're not having to discuss it or debate it because it's taken for granted.
Exactly.
Right? That's what you do. And we were just discussing this a little earlier, Ratna, because look, for me, to be completely honest, it's somewhat baffling to be having discussions about female boss and is there a glass ceiling and what is the ratio. For me, the reason it is baffling is that in my entire working career, I've always had a female boss, always, from day one. And I've always worked in an organization which is female majority. So I don't know any other way to be. Are you telling me it's not the norm?
I kind of agree with Aparna there, okay? So I think there are lots, don't get me wrong, even when I started out almost 25 years ago, there were lots of women who were working in the industry, there were lots of them in the creative field, but there were still lots of areas where women were not there, okay? So for instance, in pure production, you wouldn't hear of too many female heads of production. They were not there. In finance, there weren't that many women. You know, it's a little different there. And eventually, for it to cease to be a point of discussion, it needs to be a fabric of that creation. It just needs to exist, right, across departments. Then, Vikram, you've been fortunate that you've had female bosses, and I know because we worked in a common organization, NDTV. But it brings, it's a lot of, the dialogue is very different, the conversation is very different, the ideas you'll pick up is very different if there's a female voice, the way you'll put the team together, the writing team, so many things, the way you'll cast, the way you'll market, everything changes when there is equal representation. It's a very different ballgame.
May I just add something to it? I also feel that, you know, some of this change, you have to be intentional about it, you have to be mindful about it, and you have to be relentless about it. To give you an instance, we have made it a mandate that every writer's room of ours has to have a woman. We are now working towards getting at least 30% women, across all HODs in all of our shows. It's a tall order, but it's an intentional action that we are working towards. I also just wanted to point out that there weren't so many women and there aren't so many women because, you know, historically we've not had those opportunities. There were no too many assistant directors, there were no too many assistant cinematographers, assistant editors, we never got the opportunities. So now to suddenly imagine that there will be a lot of women directors and writers, it's, you know, it's not possible because we've not had that opportunity, we've not had that training ground. So it's important for women who are now at the helm of affairs to make this intentional change. For us to have that kind of, business that we are talking about. To give you an example, for, and I can only talk about Amazon, but 4 More Shots Please, you know, a show of ours, 3 seasons, because it was loved and absolutely viable for us, made in heaven, you know, helmed by women. For the first time, a character from the LGBTQIA plus community, you know, not, as a friend or a sidekick, but headlining the show, you know, and accepted, and the show went into a subsequent season. This year we put out shows like Dahar, like Jubilee, strong women. You have to make that intentional, mindful change for things to change.
And I couldn't agree more, Vikram. You know, it's 20 years to Indian Idol that we've been producing in this country. I did the first season, and I remember that when we went casting, right, these are real people we're talking about. They're bringing their real life stories to us, and we're portraying that. There were barely any women. This weekend, we had our finale, and when the top 6 lined up, there were 3 boys and 3 girls. It was a really proud moment for us. In season 1,
and without any effort for gender balancing, so it happened organically.
No, but I agree with it, Aparna. Initially, we had to make it intentional. Girls would come to auditions, not tell their folks. And I'd have the job of calling parents and saying, please, wo bahut acha gaati hai, usko aane do na, chance do na, tumhara life ban jayega, family ka life ban jayega, right? To today, when parents come into the room with them and say, I want my daughter to pursue her dream, because we've had success
20 years of effort.
Women. 20 years of intentional effort, and slowly the fabric is changing. So we've got miles to go before we sleep, but there is a silver lining.
So does it require risk-taking in some way? That, there's a formula
like I said, on TV and streaming, it's far easier. And I said it before this, and I'll continue saying it, because there is an equal and easy opportunity. But where the money lies with the man, it's still very tough. And like I said, I might be going against the tide and saying this, but a lot of women wait for their husbands to buy their tickets in the theater. The choice of movies, that's where I was actually going at. Because you know what happens is, see, TV, streaming, these are platforms, and they're great. But when you talk about a really like a high-end, high, big budget, 100 crore film, and you say, okay, Deepika is there or Alia is there, definitely the film, because they're led by these women. But when you start talking about slightly radical topics about women, on film and extremely conservative mediums like television, there's still resistance. I'd like to point out something. I personally, I'm a firm believer that in the last 30 years, from the time I came and people were calling me lady producer, there's a huge change. No one really knew what how can a producer be a woman? And me and my mom started the company, people said, why aren't you using your dad's name? He is the big name. You both are the flunkies on the side. And from there it's changed a lot. But just recently this happened. I went for a meeting, and I went with a friend of mine who's another producer, he's a boy, and there were a lot of executives. And there were lots of men in the room. And in 5 minutes, they had made a circle of people standing, and for almost 5 minutes, I was standing alone. And I was in shock, because I was like, okay, this is funny. Why is this happening? And then a few minutes later, a few women were there, and I was supposed to go and stand with them. And I was in a bit of a shock, and this was like this high-end, top brass executive meeting. And I turned around and I told my friend, I said, does this happen often? And he said, I don't know. I really made it a point after that to ask a lot of women working in a few organizations around there. And they said, we are in a room, and normally someone will turn around and say, okay, when these girls leave, we'll crack that joke. And I felt so like upset, not because of anything else, but because if it can happen to me, at where I stand, which I feel is a bit, I've so-called reached somewhere. How tough it must be for women to feel included, and therefore I feel we still are a long way because the mindset in so many organizations still hasn't changed.
Richa, you must be facing the pressure in multiple directions. You're also known as being really outspoken. You don't hesitate to speak your mind. You're on social media, taking it on, fighting trolls. You don't seem to care what anybody is saying. Do you have people looking at you and saying, "Bhai, ye sab kyun bolti ho? Thoda low profile ho jao. Why are you so controversial? Zyada bolti ho. Kyun kehne ki zarurat hai?"
अब तो बहुत कम बोलती हूँ मैं as compared to what I was like. I think
Not that sure. I've been seeing recent tweets.
I honestly, well, people say that yeah, but don't be outspoken, but then there's the reverse also. They're like, wow, you're so courageous, for instance, and that can make your day, and it'd be nice to hear. I mean, I really don't think that we should bother, honestly, because social media is meant to democratize voice. Like everyone can have a voice, and you can also have anonymity. So then there's no sort of like, in very few cases will you follow up trolling with a complaint. And like I was telling you back there, I go and look at the DP of the person trolling me and I'm like, बेचारा. And you know, then you just feel like उसका पेंट फील हो रहा है, वो दुखी लग रहा है, बिल्कुल ना खुश लग रहा है जिंदगी से, तो 2 बार कुछ बोल के खुश हो रहा है, तो हम लाइक ठीक है भाई. Plus there's record unemployment, and then these things are also paid gigs, so I'm like, good for you. You're making bread and butter for your family. I support it wholeheartedly. Please go for it.
That's the attitude. That's the attitude. Adda, I just want to ask you about, you know, the glass ceiling now, rising all the way to the top. Now, there's a certain perception that, look, India's a land of paradoxes and women are treated really badly in many areas, but in many other ways, there's no glass ceiling. They can rise all the way to the top. You can have a prime minister, leader of political parties, chairmen of banks, you know, all of you. Is there a glass ceiling in India still or no?
In absolute terms, yes. So what Ekta is talking about, there have been enough leadership meetings and summits and platforms that you go to, and it's a sea of men.
Yeah.
And so many, that's what you call it. And there's so many things, right, Vikram?
Okay, majority men on a panel. I'm speaking as a minority here right now for obvious reasons, but majority of men on a panel is one thing, but a glass ceiling which says a woman can't be the boss. Is that still an attitude?
Limited. We're talking numbers, right? And then if you talk, there's so many, so there are so many manifestations of this. So for instance, the pay gaps. There's so many, right? There's so many ways of looking at this, Vikram.
Yeah.
You know, Vikram, I'd like to share an anecdote. I joined, it's a couple of years ago, and I was sitting in a conference room, you know, for a pitch, and there was a big Bollywood producer who walked in, and, you know, he was sitting opposite me, and there was silence for 10 minutes. He just wouldn't speak. So after 10 minutes, I asked him if he was waiting for someone, and he said, "Your boss." Yeah, and so I said, "I'm the boss." You can narrate it to me. And after 15, and so he was, of course, completely flummoxed. He kept looking here and there, and then he said, "Shall we reschedule and I'll come again?" So he wasn't okay talking about his story to me. But I'm really glad and thankful to, you know, women like Ekta and Richa and Aradhana, you know, who've shattered all glass ceilings. They've opened the doors for people like us to get in. And I really keep telling everyone that, you know, go in, find your place, sit down, and if there's no chair, drag it in and find your place. There is glass ceiling, of course.
Yeah. I mean, Ekta sitting here. Ekta, do you remember on one of our seasons of TED Talks, she did a TED Talk for us, and I remember that line so distinctly from her TED Talk. She said, "I didn't have a plan B. Yeah. This is what I had to do, and I had to succeed." Right? So it's not easy to get here. There are
Well,
no
no one
plan
was
B.
launching me. I had to launch myself as a producer.
There you go.
Thank God you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank God you did. Okay, I'm just going to, you know, I know we are running out of time very soon, but I just wanted to let's do some brainstorming about an actual problem, right? So sometimes when it comes to, I keep hearing people saying, we've got to change people's mindsets, right? And especially the way people approach women in this country. We've heard it most recently, you know, the horrible thing that we just saw in Jharkhand, and after that led to a major debate about the way women are in general treated in India, the way they're stared at, you know, on the streets, groped in many places. And people said, attitudes need to change. I just want to know what do all of you feel, because you're also in a business of shaping people's minds. You're influencers to that extent. The programs you do, the content that you create can sometimes change people's mind. Do you think it can be done? Do you think it should be done? Do you think it's unfair to say that women have a special responsibility out here? Do you think women can play a greater role because you know how to get the message across in the right manner?
I don't know if we necessarily know how to get the message across, but I think like intentionality really matters. We can sit in these English panels in five-star hotels, but we have to translate that into something actual. What do all of us take back from this conversation? Why is it beneficial not just to the very often the minute you start talking about gender, there's a perception of someone deeply disgruntled and unhappy. Like, oh, I didn't like, but this is so unfair. It's not always that. It's also sort of progress. Some of the countries that are marked highest in terms of happiness in the world have great gender parity. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just all get along and be safe, travel when we wanted to, have transport? Why do people go to, say, a safe haven like Goa, for instance, where women feel freer in being themselves? Now that'll immediately get associated with something negative in terms of a cultural context. So I just want to say, if you actually look around, genuinely everyone will be happier if there was more women in teams. I'll give you an example. This year I turned producer. We went to shoot a film called Girls Will Be Girls, and that is me and my husband Ali's first film as producers, and the director was a woman, and she wanted, there was also sexuality in the film, so she wanted an all-female team. Okay, you know, actors thode young hai or sada. Otherwise, what happens normally, I can tell you from this side, is like you're pretending to like be really into this guy and trying to kiss him and be in the moment, and then someone is holding a, you know, big thermocol, and they're like, nahi, ek minute cut, isko thoda upar karo. Nahi, shadow aa raha hai. And like, there's no sense, you don't feel safe always. And in an emotional way, not necessarily in a physical way. We wanted to make an all-female crew or a largely female crew. Or lighting department mein there are no women in India. You never hear you say light dada, light men. There's no women. So that was one department. Like you said, slowly the participation of women has been increasing in all departments, like producers, thanks to people like Ekta and so on. So we did this. We thought, how about we do a little training program, because there's nothing. We'll speak to a grips company and we'll see if we can train people. I'm laughing because this sounds crazy, but it actually happened.
It's fantastic.
We applied for a grant to Berlinale. We won 2 grants instead of 1. We got some money, we put it together. We put out a call and 40 women sent in their applications. Out of them, 10 were selected. We went and spoke to this company called Light and Light, which is in Goregaon. And they said, hum aapko trainer de denge. And they spent time teaching girls storytelling through lighting, moody lighting, different types of things, like how to use new technology, how to use an app. 10 of these women were trained. Ali also attended the workshop. And one of them we hired on our set. One of them is working on the sets of Mirzapur. One of them was working with Vishal Bhardwaj. Now this is
intentional.
This is intentional. This is an educational thing. We identify कि अच्छा यहाँ नहीं है. So what can we do to bridge this gap first? Because you see that things are, and like of all the women on the stage, I'd love for you to hire some of the girls we train, because they're excellent. And I don't think formal training for lighting exists in this country. So these girls will be at an advantage. Please hire them and use them. And this is all free of cost. We had girls who were tribal girls from Chhattisgarh. We had girls from Bombay, Delhi, everywhere. Girls who couldn't speak English or Hindi.
So that's a great practical example of how you can change behavior and change attitudes. You want to, coming back to the theme that I was talking about, changing attitudes in general? Agar आदमियों का attitude change करना है, they should not be staring at girls or harassing them in public transport, especially in Delhi. Can that be done?
I mean, don't put everything on to only entertainment. Definitely we are culture shapers. I don't shirk from that responsibility, take it very seriously. But this is everything, Vikram. It's also upbringing, it's background, it's education, it's so many things, right, that play a role in this. And it can definitely be done. We are doing our bit.
Yeah, every day.
Ekta, changing attitudes?
Yeah, but actually my personal belief is the day women, see, we have started pedestalizing women. Good girls and bad girls. That's where the real problem is. I was on a panel a few years ago and that's when I decided not to do any. Today was after a long many years. Because I had these 3 women, very lovely women, discussing how they will never touch anything sexual. Because suddenly they want to present women in a positive light. And I told these girls afterwards, I said, you all are doing the biggest disservice to women. You are creating this belief that if I'm a good girl and I'm only a good girl, should I be revered? If I achieve something, I fly a plane, I study, pass my exams. If I drink, if I enjoy, if I wear a short skirt, I'm a bad girl. Suddenly you have a right to judge me. So I decided I'll just go on the other side and make all bad girl stories. Because guess what? I am a bad girl. I'll wear a short skirt if I had the body, of course. But I don't care because that's the scary part. Every girl is trying to fit in. The individuality that lets you breathe is being stifled because you're supposed to fit in, to be accepted by even us. So I want to actually say, it's time we stop giving people a pedestal and then later on telling them to live on that and live just there. I made a pedestal of the stones thrown at me. So I want women to know it's okay to follow the unbeaten path and be where you want to be because you don't have to fit in. And therefore, I feel there's a real big need now for us to start telling women to just be. It's very, very important.
Just be, you don't have to fit in. You resonate with that?
I played a mother to someone twice my age in my almost first film. So I totally don't care about fitting in. Because it's like very cookie cutter. But we are all part of this problem. We all have certain expectations from each other, from our families. Ghar ki bahuein, betiya, mummy.
Okay. I think we are flat out of time. Let me get a final thought from you.
No, I just wanted to say that, stories can connect. They can inspire, they can provoke thought. And I feel like, as somebody who has the ability to be an enabler, I take this role very, very responsibly. And the kind of stories that we've put out, we have women who are vulnerable, who are flawed, who are overly ambitious, who don't care anything about what society thinks of them. They're good girls. They are smart girls. And those shows have worked. And it's really important that we put out all facets of women. And I feel that the most important thing that we can do is when we give agency to women on screen to do whatever they want. Not decide what they should be doing. That's really important. But before that, it's important to have women on screen. Have them share equal time. On screen, behind screen, during promotions. That's really important. It's important for people to see women. That's important.
I think that's a fantastic comment to end this on.
Who doesn't want to see women? No guy in this room is going to go to an all-male film if there's no sign of a woman. Come on, get real, guys.
Not just be wallflowers, not just be vases.
Look at the number of people who are refusing to leave this particular gathering.
मुझे तो लग रहा है इनको कैद करके यहाँ रखा है किसी ने.
No, but I think it would be good to just be, unapologetically just be. It shouldn't be an apology, whatever you want to be, right? Just be unapologetic.
All right, on that note, we have to end this session. Thank you all so much for having joined us. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikram, for braving for women.
Thank you.
Thank
Vikram.
you.
It's been a pleasure.